So, it's been a little while since I've had the chance to sit down and talk with someone here on the channel. And if you have ever considered going to Normandy, you need to watch all of this episode. And if you are just into World War II in general, then you definitely need to watch all of this episode. I had a chance to sit down with Paul Woodadge. Paul is the widely regarded as the gold standard whenever it comes to battlefield tour guides in Normandy. He's a published author. I found out he was an extra on Saving Private Ryan, and just has a depth of knowledge that I'm frankly envious of. And he has a YouTube channel called WW2TV that I don't know of any other place on YouTube where you can go and get access to historians and just the depth of knowledge and be challenged in ways that you never thought you would be challenged than what you will with Paul's channel. So anyway, I'll stop yapping. Here is my talk with Paul Woodadge. All right, so yeah, I guess we'll go ahead and just jump right in here. I'll be honest, I don't know exactly where to start with you because your resume is, you have a pretty rich resume. So there's, correct me if I'm wrong, there's battlefield tour guide at Normandy.
Yep.
Published author.
Yep.
Token British guy on some high profile documentaries.
Yep.
and now operating this World War II TV channel, which is absolutely brilliant. I definitely want to get into that later. I guess I'm kind of curious, where did all this start? Like, what was the genesis of all of this?
It's something I didn't understand for many years, and then as I got older, I understood where it all came from, and it is simply the age I am. When I was a kid in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, World War II was going through a kind of a positive revival phase. Our comics that we read as little boys were all about World War II. War films Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon. Veterans were living around us. You know, everybody knew the parachute guy, regiment guy down the road, and the sapper down over there. And it's extraordinary how many historians there are who are within about 2 or 3 years of my age doing this for a living, because they had that complete immersion in World War II. And it kind of stopped a few years after then, because you get sort of science fiction films came out, and people weren't playing with the war toys in the same way they had in my generation. Basically, my dad played cowboys and Indians in the garden when he was a kid. I played World War II.
Yeah.
And it was just that complete, World War II was our lives. That was it. And so that's really where it came from. So as a kid, when I was asked by my mum and dad where did I want to go, it was always museums. It was airfields. It was Normandy when I was 14 years old the first time. So I do not remember a time where World War II was not an enormous part of my life.
Now, you live in Normandy now, don't you?
Yeah, I'm about 15 minutes from Omaha Beach. Yeah.
Okay. What part of Britain were you originally from?
Essex, so northeast London. So right
Okay.
in the middle for American viewers of the 8th Air Force bases. So, I mean, I grew up cycling around the perimeter track of, I could get to 2 US Army Air Force bases from where I lived. So that was something, again, that was part of my growing up, you know, hanging around control towers and cycling around the perimeter tracks and all that. So, you know, it was, again, World War II was just there, literally on my doorstep. And now it's on my doorstep, but a different theater of operations, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah. So how did you get from, growing up in Essex and, playing World War II and everything like that? Did the battlefield tour guide, is that what came first?
Yeah, so kind of. I didn't know I was doing it at the time. What happened is, long story short, is I would come as a guest on buses of British veterans to Normandy, often just sort of volunteering to push wheelchairs, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And what would happen is the bus would perhaps pull up at some little obscure place, and the veterans will go off down this little country path and stand by little copse of trees and get all very, upset and talk about things and lay wreaths. And the wives would stay on the bus, for example, and people would say, the wives would say, what are they doing over there? And I go, well, that's the wood where they lost 2 tanks on June the 9th, whatever it would be.
Right.
Oh, I didn't know that. They go there every year. They never tell us why they go there, that kind of thing. And it became my unofficial job to explain to people who didn't know why they were going to certain places, And that then evolved into sometimes the veterans would come up and say, you know what, Paul, can you put this into context for us? Because we understand what our regiment was doing here, but we have no idea what the greater operation was. So I said, well, this is part of Operation Totalize. This is where you were trying to do this. And that understanding that veterans absolutely know what they were doing, but they don't necessarily know why they were doing it or what was happening a mile or to their left or right. And so I found myself filling in gaps. And then I started organizing trips for kind of groups of military modelers and things like that. And then a long time ago, I decided I wanted to leave what I was doing. I was a graphic designer, was my kind of profession for a while. I just was bored with it and just thought I could do something where I could tap into the various things I've been doing. I've done a lot of work as a movie extra. I was in Saving Private Ryan as an extra, things like that as well.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, that's another thing. You can check my Internet Movie Database listing. I was in The Mummy and things like that. Just again, I was self-employed. I lived near London. I was available, so I was registered as a specialist military supporting artiste, which meant I had a little certificate that I was range competent. I could fire a rifle, and yes, there are some Europeans who can fire rifles. And I could do foot drill. I can still, if I need to, do American Civil War foot drill. I can just about remember the Union drill is slightly different to the Confederate drill. Anyway, and that was one of those things that got me into these work as a specialist as extras. So that was another little string to my bow. And then, so battlefield guiding kind of was a process of evolution, really. But I've been doing it for 20 years now. And then doing what I'm doing now with WW2TV is like a next step of that evolution, really.
Okay. So the Saving Private Ryan thing, that's kind of interesting to me. What as an extra, what scenes were you kind of involved in?
2. One was I was one of the 325th glider guys walking past when Tom Hanks and the guys are sifting through dog tags.
Okay.
And there's that kind of not confrontation, but that the glider guys got to look at the way they're doing it, and but you don't see me. I know when I'm coming up. I know. I see a guy who's like 4 or 5 ahead of me, and then it cuts to when I've gone past. So I know that I'm about to appear, but I don't actually appear. So there's that one. And then the other scene was filmed in, if I can't remember which studio it was, but it was in a water tank, and it was at the back end of a landing craft.
Okay.
Not the front end, had a gimbal attached to it and cameras, and it was stuntmen at the front, a few extras at the back, and it was constantly, we filmed it about 3 or 4 times a day, rolled on its side, having been hit by, mine or something.
Yeah.
So we'd get turfed into the water, then these wardrobe people would dry us out with hair dryers, back in the landing craft, do it again, roll over, and that scene never made it into the film. So I hope that there'll be some kind of director's cut one day that will come out, and I go, there I am. But I'm not grumbling, because it was really good money for that, because the getting wet bit earned me another 30 or 40 quid a day or something. So that was quite, at the time, that was decent money. I was getting more money to being paid, being turfed out of a landing craft than I was as a graphic designer. And so that's my Saving Private Ryan story.
Interesting. I've always kind of wondered what, what the behind the scenes stuff always interests me just as much as the movie. So like if I get a Blu-ray or DVD, I'm kind of anxious to get through the movie so that I can get to the part where they show the behind the scenes stuff. And I've read the script for Saving Private Ryan, and I've for years wished that they would have some sort of release where they would show like some of the deleted scenes that didn't make the cut. So, and I know that you've been involved in, and like I said, some pretty high profile documentaries and things too. With the movies, Saving Private Ryan is probably my favorite movie of all time, but there are some things in it that are just maddening to me, like little, as a World War II nerd, little bits that they got wrong. Like instead of saying flash and thunder, they say thunder and flash.
Yeah,
Um, and uh, and this kind of probably ties into the Battlefield Guide stuff as well. Um, I've found that a lot of people are shocked that at Omaha Beach there's not a giant observation bunker right there in the Dog Green sector. Um, so on those sets, at least with your experience or to your knowledge, do, I'm assuming that there's like a historical advisor on set.
Oh, there are. Yeah.
That, do,
But
do they listen to them ever?
no, I mean, bottom line, no. Well, yes. But you can. I mean, I know Dale Dye is a friend of mine. He was on Saving Private Ryan, as you know, and Band of Brothers, and they've learned, these people, to pick their battles, because there's 10 things you as a historical advisor will see wrong, and you think, well, if I mention that one, do I really want that one? You know, because it's better to get the really important one addressed if you can, uh, and then trying to do all of them. But the problem is you're facing everybody's opinion. You're just one little part of a process, in that the stuntmen have their view, the cinematographer, the safety people, the vehicle experts. We can't get that vehicle close enough to there. The pyro guys say we can't do that there. You're trying to present things essentially on a flat screen that happened in a three-dimensional environment. So I know what you mean about that bunker on Saving Private Ryan, but I see from the filmmaker's point of view that it provides that visual threat.
Right.
It's obvious and distinctive that the real Omaha Beach, had they presented it accurately, wouldn't have done, because, as you know, because you've been to Dog Green, there were houses along that sector. And you know, in fact, Dale Dye, I think, told me they made a decision that they weren't going to put the houses in the background of the film that would have been there, because it would have diluted the fear effect they're trying to convey to an audience of people sitting in a theater. And when you say it like that, it makes perfect sense.
Right.
But when you're saying it as someone like yourself, who's a military historian, you go, but why did they put that in? Why is the beach too small? Why are the obstacles the wrong way round? All those things there. So the trick, I think, is understanding what the purpose of films is, and not getting it confused with a history source. Right. And Saving Private Ryan is a very valid way of introducing people to World War II. It introduces the themes of sacrifice and dying for your brother, and some very important ideas about loss and how the American military process works, and brothers and all that. But don't go to it to learn how the Battle of Omaha Beach panned out, because it's just going to take you down a wrong path. What's the legacy of Saving Private Ryan that I think is fascinating is that when Spielberg and his buddies made that, they didn't know that that is now the elephant in the room. Every time, every tour guide, filmmakers ever stood on Omaha Beach with a group of other people, you have to mention the film, because if you don't, they will. And it's the elephant in the room that you have to kind of bring in and go, okay, you've all seen the film, and I know even though you're trying not to, you're running through those visuals in your head now. Let's look at some of the things that it did wrong. Let's look at some of the things it did right and address that, and then let's move on. You know, because if you don't address it, they're going to just, you've got kind of two competing things going on in your group's head. They're running Saving Private Ryan soundtrack in one, and then they're listening to you, and they're not connecting. So you kind of mention it and say, okay, the beach was too small, the guns are the wrong way around, this, that, and the other. It's for me, it's a film of diminishing returns. Each time I watch it now, I like it a little bit less. Really? I really liked it a lot at the beginning. Gettysburg falls into that category as well. I have some films that each time I watch them again, I like them more. But Saving Private Ryan for me is, I noticed another little thing, and the power, that impact is lessening.
So, yeah, like I said, it still remains, I don't know how many times I've seen it. It's over 100, I would guess.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a bunch. Well, here's the deal. A lot of people know that I'm an educator, so I'll show that movie to my classes. So that kind of racks up the total. but every time in that opening scene, whenever I see the ramps pointed the wrong way, I'm like, who was there nobody on the set that said, hey, let's turn these around?
Yeah, no, exactly. And here's a story about that. And I forget which museum it was in the USA, but some little old guy, after that movie came out, like 2 years later, 3 years later, made like some 8 foot by 4 foot model of Omaha Beach.
Uh-huh.
That he donated to a museum. It wasn't a huge, it was more of one of those sort of county museums, or but he had the obstacles, the Saving Private Ryan way, and he had the Saving Private Ryan big bunker. Now, the people in the museum sort of said, thank you very much, little old guy who spent 2 years making that, but can you go back and turn the obstacles back the correct way and perhaps move the monument down the road? And they didn't. And so it went into the museum. So that means a mistake in a film, which you can say, okay, it's a mistake in a film, has now become a mistake in a film that's become a model in a museum. Now that's, as your reaction on your face,
that's problematic.
Is a problem. It's a problem. But I can understand completely why some curator didn't want to tell this little old guy who'd spent 14,000 hours making this out of matchsticks and old, I don't know what it made out of. Oh, excuse me, you've got your monuments, your things the wrong way around. So that's not Spielberg's fault.
Right.
That's collectively the fault of the model maker assuming that's correct, the museum not having the nerve to say, or at least put a photo up saying, beside the monument, the model saying, yeah, actually they were this way around. Here's a photo. Maybe they've done that since. Maybe they've had enough people tell them. But yeah, that's a dilemma that complicated.
So your depth of knowledge is like doctorate level compared to mine, as far as like World War II and Normandy and stuff like that. Is there a film or a series that, which one gets it as close to being right as what you've seen?
Well, it's got to be Band of Brothers, isn't it? I mean, it even though there are mistakes, even though they merge characters, in terms of I think it's because they went into it with a pure sense of respect.
Uh-huh.
That it's unlikely to be surpassed, I would imagine, because anything that happens in the future will not have that connection with the veterans because they won't be around. I mean, the 8th Air Force thing is in the works, and I know John Orloff, who wrote a couple of episodes of Band of Brothers, who's writing Masters of the Air, and I know they'll put exactly the same level of attention to it they did to Band of Brothers and the Pacific, but it'll be missing a little bit of that veteran peer review, if you like.
Yeah.
But yeah, Band of Brothers has to be the gold mark standard for anything that's trying to depict World War II history, at least from a Western point of view. I would say Talvis Sota, the Winter War, the Finnish War about the 1940 is probably, a more historically accurate film. There are some Russian films, there are some Polish films that are probably on a par with Band of Brothers. But in terms of English language, Band of Brothers is the top of the tree, definitely.
That's always kind of what I've said too. Like you can pretty much hold Ambrose's book in your hand and kind of go along and follow along with the series. It's definitely a remarkable work. But I didn't know if there was anything else out there that from your perspective maybe hit kind of close.
There's an old British movie from 1949 or so, 1950, called They Were Not Divided, about Guards Armored Division in Normandy, that I think is particularly good. Although they do use German paratroops are wearing British parachute smocks or something, and the German weaponry is wrong. But in terms of how a British tank unit operated, that's pretty good, but that's pretty obscure, and it's it's not going to be seen by people. And that's the thing, for something to be significant, it has to be something that's seen by a lot of people. Otherwise, it's not working. You could write some incredible university thesis about something, but only circulate it to your 5 best friends. What purpose is it serving? It's only if tens of thousands of people are seeing it or reading it does it become in any way significant. And that's something about popular history that I think it needs to be addressed is that there's no point doing something unless it's finding its audience or some sort of audience.
Yeah. So kind of circling back to the Battlefield tour guide, I was talking to George Les Jr., who,
Yeah,
if
good old
people,
George.
yeah, if people are familiar with, Band of Brothers, they're probably familiar with the character in the series, real life individual George Les. This is his son, and just as a tip of a hat to you, he kind of referred to you as like the gold standard of tour guides in Normandy. He said there's nobody who's going to be better than Paul Woodadge. And I know that there's a lot of people who like going to Normandy, and it was the same thing for me. Going to Normandy is kind of like a pilgrimage experience. If a person only has, let's say, like 2 days or 3 days, like a short, compact amount of time, where are you taking them?
Well, where I'm taking them and where I wish I was taking them aren't necessarily the same thing. When we get through this COVID nightmare and I can tour again, I've made a decision that I'm going to be much tougher. That's not the right word, but try to really influence people about what it is they do and how they can best get an experience out of Normandy. Broadly speaking, the error people make, including the tour guides, including myself, is they visit Normandy horizontally when they should be visiting vertically. By which I mean is they tour along the beaches. So you go and do, whether you're doing Utah and Omaha or Sword and Gold, you kind of go along sideways and you look at the monuments there and you focus on this, and here's where another lot came ashore, here's where another lot came ashore. That's not the direction the Allied troops went. They landed and went south. Well, Utah Beach, they landed and went across, but broadly speaking. And the problem with Americans and or Brits coming to Normandy now is they have in their head their list of must-see places. So Americans, it's going to be Pointe du Hoc, Omaha Beach, the American Cemetery, Santa Mary-Glise. And to do those places, we need a day, 2 days, 3 days. But what I'm going to try and do in the future is say, look, you're not going to, if you will follow my advice, you're not going to see all of the places that are on your bucket list. You'll see some of them, but you'll see other sites that connect better into a narrative story that has more of a beginning and an end. By which I mean, we could do, for example, the Utah airborne sector, but rather than going from there over to Omaha Beach and doing Omaha Beach, go up towards Cherbourg, which was, of course, the objective of the 7th Corps, and kind of come to some conclusion, or follow the 82nd across Splinter and get to where they cut off in La Haye Dupuis and across it, or follow the Omaha Beach forces in towards San Lo. And that way you'd be leaving with a trilogy of films having been covered, as opposed to starting off 3 separate trilogies, if that movie analogy doesn't make sense. And that's that, but that's the struggle, is because everybody who's been to Normandy, American or British, has a friend who's already been there who will list to them the places they must see, which are incredible places, and they will want to see those same places.
Yeah.
And before, I didn't know you back then, but before you went to Normandy, if someone said JD is going to Normandy to be filming some places, I probably could have predicted the places you were going to film at.
100%.
And you did well, and you did some amazing stuff there. But there are also places that you didn't do, and I realized I didn't have much time. And there was a non-linear approach to how you looked at Normandy. You were it was a buffet. Oh, what a bit of that. Oh, cake. And there was a bit of, bunkers. Let's go there. Airborne, and that's how we all do it. Yeah. And that is, I think, where we're kind of making a bit of a mistake. If I'm being brutally honest.
No, you're 100% right. And I wish that I would have given myself more time, for one thing, in that series. I didn't give myself nearly enough time. I was there for 2 days. So it was a marathon.
And visiting and filming in 2 days. Wow. I mean, yeah, we had this discussion before, but yeah, I mean, the bottom line is Americans and Brits aren't spending enough time in Normandy. They're spending 3 or 4 days in Paris. Great, fine. I love Paris. Well, actually, I don't love Paris. I quite like Paris. I like going there for gigs. That's what I like. I like to see music, but the place, yeah. But Normandy needs some time, and one of the drum I beat a lot, and I did a couple of talks in England in 2019 now, was about this focus on the June the 6th aspect and not the Battle of Normandy. And I'm part of all sorts of Facebook groups where they're always going on about the tragedy of Omaha Beach and how many people lost at Omaha Beach. And it's all very, very, very wonderful that these people are acknowledging those who paved the way for the democracy we live in today. But these people have no idea about the places inland like Purple Heart Alley and Hill 192 and Mortan and things like that. And when I try and point out, as many people died at these other locations, at these ones, and they don't seem to want to listen. And even the tourism department in Normandy, I think there are 33 sites in Normandy classified by the Conseil Régional as being associated with the remembrance of the patrimony of the history of Normandy or something. And of those 33 sites, 30 are on the D-Day on the beaches, and only 3 are inland. And it's Montormel in the Falaise Gap, I think, Saint-Maur-Église, which technically is inland, but it's still D-Day. And I forget what the third one is. And so people are coming, and they're spending 95% of their time in Normandy visiting the sites located that are about the first 5% of the Normandy campaign, because it was a 76-day campaign.
Yeah.
And essentially what they're doing is, I use a Civil War parallel, is they're going to Gettysburg and doing day 1, and then they're not doing day 2 and day 3. And that's what's happening again and again and again. Well, of course, at Gettysburg, that's not how it works.
Right.
People always get up to Pickett's Charge and do day 3. But in Normandy, somehow, day 1 has become the obsession. And people don't even know there's a day 2, day 3, or in this case, a day 75. And that's something that I think needs to change.
I'm kind of glad that you mentioned that, because I was going to ask you where in Normandy is it that people don't go that they should, because I think you're right. Everybody does what I did. They hit those high points. They basically go along the beach, and I mean, one of my biggest goals is to get back to Normandy, spend some time there, do it properly, and tell some of these stories, and show some of these places that haven't got the attention that they deserve. So I mean, just off the top of your head, what are a few that you think are noteworthy?
I mean, the 6-week Battle for Saint-Lô, which is not necessarily about the town itself. And a few Americans do actually manage to get themselves to the city itself, but it was rebuilt and there are some monuments there to see, but it's the journey to Saint-Lô that's the thing.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it means a lot more preparation and planning than going to the beaches, because on the beaches, everything's kind of marked out for you. There's monuments there, there's maps, there's little brochures you can pick up in the tourist offices that tell you where to park. There's public bathrooms, there's restaurants, there's museums. Going inland is a little bit more of an exploration. You've got to do your groundwork. You've got to take your maps and your books with you, because a lot of the places that make the Battle for Saint-Lô understandable are kind of obscure stops in villages where you've got a view across some high ground, or the Battle for Cherbourg, for example, the same kind of thing. Mortan, for example, the hill down towards Avranches, which was the in the way of the German counterattack towards Avranches. And I'm sure as I'm saying this, people are watching the show going, what the hell's Avranches? What German counterattack? Because they don't know. And where the American 30th Division, guys from the South Carolina and what have you, and are there on this hill watching about 6 different German armor divisions bash towards them, and then Typhoons and P-51s come in. And it's an incredible location when you're standing on that hill and you can see Mont Saint-Michel 15 miles away, sitting over there in the bay, and someone's explaining just what's happening around you, where these American troops are cannibalizing batteries out of, electric razors to keep the radios going, to keep communication, to keep the forward observers in contact with the artillery. And when you're there, your audience basically has no knowledge of this prior to going there, unless their father or their grandfather was there. Yet when you take them to Pointe du Hoc or Omaha Beach, in a sense, they know it already. That's the irony, is because they've seen the documentaries and they've read the books, you're only reinforcing ideas and concepts they kind of know already. Whereas you go inland and you've got and everything gets so much, the scales get larger, and the armored engagements that happened inland, and the columns of, and it gets more multinational as well, because you can bring in the Poles, you can bring in all, the Canadians, and so get inland. Just anywhere inland basically is if you can't see the sea, you're doing something different. If you can see the sea, you're following the crowd.
I think anybody who's watching this is probably seeing really the importance that I kind of missed of linking up with a good local guide who knows where they're going, knows the stories, and can kind of maybe hit those high points and go to all of those typical places that everybody hits, but also show you the things that typically get overlooked and that you wouldn't know. And I've been kind of on both ends of it. So the very first trip that I took to Normandy, I took a group of students on a student tour, and the lady who was guiding the trip, God bless her, she was a nice woman. She had no clue where she was or anything about the history. Like, we went to Pointe du Hoc, and she was trying to tell the kids that she was originally Canadian. She was trying to tell them that Canadians had attacked at Pointe du Hoc. And I'm sitting there in the back. I'm like, no, that's not right.
No.
And then we were at a hotel on Gold Beach, and we were going to be like late for dinner. So she was just going to skip Omaha Beach altogether and not even go there. Yeah, we almost got
my mind just got blown there. Yeah, okay, yeah.
I'm a pretty easygoing guy and can get along with anybody. That's where I put my foot down. I'm like, no, we're not doing that. And then I've been on the complete other end of it, where, which is what you see in that series on the channel, where it's completely self-guided, where I spent a bunch of time, reading and going through tour books and looking at Google Maps and kind of doing my own thing. And even I'll admit there was a lot of stuff that I missed.
Of course.
And
I mean, I live it. I've missed stuff.
Yeah.
I want to get back, as well as being more challenging with itineraries, is I want to get back to more of an exploration side of things. And when I was coming to Normandy in my 20s, there are places I was going to then where I'd be hacking back through bracken and ferns and running the risk of falling down holes. They're now fully opened up museums, and so they're now better places to visit. Better, quote unquote. Yeah. But there was something about the exploration side that was really exciting, and I would like to see a situation where it's less the guide and the client, or the teacher and the pupil. It's more of a collaboration. It's more of a, so where are you coming from? Oh, I'm coming from South Carolina. Why don't we follow some of the units that are from South Carolina? Why don't we look at people who are alumni from university you graduated and follow some of their units? Why don't we go out together? I'll have the local knowledge, and we can, let's down low before we go some after action reports. Let's try and follow where B company of the so-and-so regiment went. And we go out there as more of a partnership. And I think people would have that spirit of adventure. They'd get something, there'd be that connection, because Normandy is becoming more commercial, as are a lot of battlefields, and it's taken away some of the deep connections. I went and had lunch yesterday with some friends of my wife's up in Ompheville, a British sector. And these, they're 80 and 78, these couple now, and they've got photos of themselves with Prince Charles back 30 years ago, and all the veterans they knew, and all the letters and the correspondence they had from commando veterans and parachute veterans, and you're thinking that's all going to be lost soon, because that generation will be gone. Not just the veterans, but the people who had the connection with the veterans. And you're seeing the museums becoming more about, the gift shop and the amenities and and less about the actual purity of the history. So bringing a sense of exploration and kind of wonder to things again, I think is something I want to kind of bring in. Pointe du Hoc now, since you've been, you have to walk through it via a roped-off walkway now. You now no longer can go inside the craters. You no longer can go inside the... And this is nothing to do with COVID, by the way. This is to do with a general decision by the ABMC, who manage it with the local littoral, who manage the coast, about the long-term preservation of the site. So you're kind of shuffled along a little path. It's becoming a little bit more theme park, a little bit less national park, if that analogy kind of works. Essentially, I'll be telling people, if you want to go to Point du Hoc, go on your own, because there's no point in going with a guide. There's nothing a guide can add to that site. Now, you've got your information pounds, go there and do that. I'd rather take you somewhere else where you're using my skills.
With Point du Hoc, so the first time I went with that tour group, we went to Point du Hoc, and it was like you said, it's kind of, it was open. You could go down in the craters and everything like that. And then whenever I went back, they had just started putting the fencing up, putting up the baby rails around the craters and everything like that. And it broke my heart. To me, it took away from the experience. But no, I completely agree with you. So what you're describing is what I did whenever we went up to Belgium, and to like St. Vith. I linked up with a local historian. I had a friend who had been taken prisoner there at St. Vith, and we'd been emailing back and forth and everything, going through after action reports and looking at maps. And then we went out and just started exploring those woods, trying to find the foxholes in the area where he was captured. And I loved it. I loved that experience.
It's goosebumps. As you as an educator, you were there. You, in that sense, you were kind of part of the process, and that will stay with you in a way than just going to a museum. Yeah, it was all right. Yeah, I learned some stuff there, but it's that deep connection. It was an emotional connection.
Yeah,
it works the memory in a different way, doesn't it? As you know, as an educator, if you can create that little spark with your kids, it's gonna lodge in that brain far better than that kind of distracted, impersonal way that sometimes museums and conventional touring can do.
Yeah. So kind of jumping off of that, where you're talking about education, your channel, which if people aren't aware, WW2TV is insanely good. I stumbled upon it. I think the first episode that I saw was a talk that you did with Alex Kershaw.
Right. Yeah.
And his book, The Bedford Boys, is really one of my favorite World War II books. And the caliber of guests, and some of the battlefield tours that you're doing live and stuff like that, really is some next level stuff. Seeing these high profile historians like James Holland and John McManus and things like that. What was the genesis of the World War II TV?
Well, it started as one thing and then became something else. I was getting a bit bored with guiding, kind of for the reasons we have established of just routine and seeing the same places. So I kind of took a bit of a year out and wanted to make documentaries, and as you do, and but I enjoyed it, but I found the editing process really sapping in time and energy and enthusiasm, and I kind of did it, and then with COVID and an ability to guide, I kind of thought, well, I like this idea of YouTube as a platform. But I think live. I want to go live. I want to do it spontaneously, which is therefore combining what I've been doing as a tour guide, where your audience is there with you, with the medium of video. Because making a documentary it's a finished product. Yeah, sure, like yourself, you engage in the comments, you can discuss, but it's you've done your work. With what I'm doing with World War II TV, except for some analysis of photo shows, everything is live.
Yeah. So
people are commenting on YouTube. People are questioning it. I've had numerous shows now where there are veterans, family members of veterans watching. I had the sister of a man who was killed in a battle I was doing a show about, watching it. I've had that a couple of times, and that creates a level of both pressure to get it right and make sure you're honoring people in the right way, but also excitement of what this resource can do. And I have been really, really lucky that the historians have wanted to leap into this and get involved in it. And I kind of know why they do, and it's nothing to do with me. It's because they're able to do something they enjoy doing. You know, John McManus, you mentioned there, who's just 30 minutes down the road from you.
Yeah.
John does a lot of, you know, he's a professor by trade, and so he's speaking to people who, some of them want to hear what he says, some of them are doing it because they have to, and so on. And he does a certain amount of PR spots and things for his books, which he has to do. I know he looks forward to my stuff because it's going into a level of detail. There's a you know, he's being interviewed by someone who knows his subject. We've all seen those historians being interviewed by someone on the radio or something, or we heard them. And so your book is about, checks notes, World War II or World War 11. I heard someone say once. You go, oh no, World War. So you wrote a book about World War 11. Now that's 2 eyes there, madam. Anyway, and you can see their interest in being there just dissipate, you know, and but they do it. It's like the same thing when you see whoever it would be, Tom Hanks doing his movie promotions.
Yeah. And
then knowing, you know, they're sitting in some, you know, hotel somewhere, and in goes Sky News, then goes CNN, and they go, and the eyes are switched off. And it's always a wonderful opportunity to work with a great director and bring this story to it. And then you see the one where they've been done something a bit differently, and you can see their eyes light up. And it's because the TV station has done something different. They brought in questions from kids or whatever it would be. And that's what I'm trying to do, is these historians are looking forward to coming on. They're getting into an environment where we're not trying to cram them into a narrow window. They can talk about stuff, and they'll get engagement from their audience, and it's touch wood, it's working so far.
Well, that's kind of what I find attractive about the interview portion of the channel is I like it for the same reason that I like podcasts. Like you said, you listen to an interview on the radio, you get like maybe 5 minutes where they're trying to cram in everything that they want to say, and they're just hitting the high points. You're hitting a level of depth with these guys, and men and women, where you're able to, I guess, explore some of the nuance that you don't get anywhere else. And I've learned a ton. Like, you know, you got the series that you're doing on, you know, the operations in Burma. That's an area of World War II where I'll admit I have very limited knowledge. So yeah, I've just been eating it up. And yeah, like I said, the caliber of guests that you had have been incredible. I don't include myself amongst those ranks, but
well, you are, and you have been a good guest, and you know, I set out at the beginning to not just use PhD historians and not just use authors. I mean, tonight, Lucy, who's on a show with me later, you know, she's an MA candidate. She's not fully qualified as a historian yet, but her grandfather was a commando in Burma, so she's talking about an operation her grandfather was in. She has studied it to a level of absolute incredible detail. I'm really looking forward to it, but she might not get a platform on a bigger channel because she's not yet finished in the process. And other people I used who aren't qualified at all. I'm not qualified. I left school at 16, but I've been doing it for a long time. So nuances. I like the fact you hit on the word nuance there, because I'm thinking of getting some a line of merchandise of something like nuance isn't sexy, but it's important. And what I mean by that is, so much historical writing and so much historical programming is about sensation. So if you're talking about a German unit, for example, they have to either be elite and fanatical Nazis, or they have to be hopeless and pathetic. Yeah. Often the truth is in the middle somewhere, you know, and commanders, you know, Montgomery is awful or he's brilliant. Most of those things don't bear much scrutiny. Most of these results end up being somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
But somewhere in the middle doesn't sell. Somewhere in the middle isn't sexy. And that's why the idea that nuance takes time as well. Saying something, you know, you go to a Civil War battlefield in the States and say, I don't know, General Meade was crap here.
Yeah.
Lee was brilliant. It's easy to say, and people who are watching it will either agree with you immediately or they'll disagree with you immediately. Going into a more nuanced look at, well, actually, in this part of the operation, I think he didn't use his artillery properly, and maybe that takes time, and some people start losing interest, and you end up taking longer to get to a statement that isn't as dramatic as just saying he was crap or was brilliant, if that makes sense. And I like this idea of nuance being the new sexy. If that, does that make any sense to you?
No, that makes perfect sense, and that's kind of why I like the medium of YouTube, because you can kind of dive into that nuance that I'm not knocking documentaries, because I love documentaries. It's pretty much the bulk of what I watch whenever I do watch TV is, something on History Channel or something like that. But I always find myself at the end thinking, what did they leave on the cutting room floor?
Yeah.
What did they not say? It's a big thing with like veteran interviews that they have on those documentaries. They'll have that little blurb where they'll talk about being under shell fire and how awful it was, and then they move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I know that you didn't talk to that guy for 15 minutes and then shuffle him out the door.
Yeah.
But
they're looking for the bits where the veteran cries. They're looking for the bit where the veteran makes a dramatic statement about a commander or a place.
Yeah. Which
are perfect. But to me, as you say, I want to see the whole. I want to see the context. I want to see what led you up to that point and that's. I mean, my experience when you mentioned at the top of the show about me doing some high-profile work with some documentaries, I was really thrilled to be invited on for the 70th to be the British talking head on History Channel's History in HD.
Yeah.
And they invited me. So we're sending a film crew, and it was me and a couple of German historians who were brought to this particular hotel in Normandy. And I was looking forward to it for weeks and weeks. And we're discussing hedgerow campaign. We're discussing artificial harbours, this, that, and the other. And I was getting really excited. I was boning up, doing my research and formulating and clarifying my ideas. And then 3 or 4 days before the interview was set, they sent me the answers to the questions I was supposed to be giving. And I was, pardon me? I thought you were asking me to give my opinion. Well, we've kind of done the script. We want you to support these ideas. And it's like, but yeah. Why not just have a robot? What if you want me to filter something? In the end, I was able to say bits I wanted to say, but I didn't use them as much because I didn't play the game as such. And and that to me I found that very, very frustrating. In that, as I did a historiography show last week, and Professor John Buckley, who teaches war studies at Wolverhampton University, who is just about one of the most knowledgeable guys about the Normandy campaign I've ever encountered in my life, and also a thoroughly nice chap. He said there is no such thing as truth in history. There's only interpretation. There's only a viewpoint, and it's impossible to say Patton is a brilliant general or a terrible general. It's just it's subjective. And on what day, by what criteria are we making these decisions? As a man manager, as a tactician, but we're in a world where we need to have these sound bites, and that's where his modern proper documentary is going. They've written the end of the documentary before they've started. They're not exploring a subject. They've got an agenda that they're pushing, which kind of brings us into modern life and journalism and the media in general, I suppose, doesn't it? But yeah. And that's very, very frustrating. And it's look at the success of hunting Hitler, based on the premise that Hitler got to Argentina. Spoiler alert: he didn't get to Argentina. He died in a bunker in 1945, torched. But the idea that he got to Argentina is again sexy. Now, yeah. Some minor Germans and some quite major Germans did get to South America. Hitler didn't, categorically didn't. But the only way that he get the program off the ground and get the interest in the public is by having this sexy idea, and I keep using the word sexy inappropriately, but it's just the one, of the fact that Hitler escaped. And the amount of Luke Daly Groves is a friend of mine who wrote a book basically trashing all the conspiracy theories about Hitler, all the stuff in the supposed in the FBI, CIA, MI6 reports. And he spends his life just jumping on people on Twitter saying, Hitler's living in Argentina and his grandson is Barack Obama, all that, which is an actual quite mainstream conspiracy. You see that one a lot and you just go, what the? And he spends his life telling people, read books, go to the archives, look at these actual documents the CIA have. Yes, they looked at lots of crazy whackpot FBI things about people saying, I think Hitler's living in my basement, you know. They checked them out because that's what they did. There is zero credibility to these things at all. But that's it. Hunting Hitler. What was it, 4 seasons or something?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was wildly successful. And I now have to tackle questions all of the time about, Hitler escaping to Argentina, and
I mean, if he did get to Argentina, he left his jawbone in Germany. So if he did there, he was eating milkshakes or something because, it's not his skull, folks. Yeah, the skull they said was that probably is someone else's, but his jawbone, kind of, they checked it with dental records. He left that behind. So he managed to make it. I know they can do wonderful things with reconstruction, but, he left his jawbone in Berlin.
Oh, man.
Well, I didn't know we'd be discussing Hitler's jawbone in this. It's gone off down an interesting rabbit hole there, but yeah, no, it's yeah.
Well, it does point out how there's it's I'm trying to think of how to phrase what I'm thinking in my head. I love living in the time that we do, where basically we've almost removed the gatekeeper or the middleman between people who know what they're talking about, professional historians, or people who have been there, like veterans, things like that, and the person sitting at home that is wanting to learn more about it. And I don't want to knock higher education or anything like that, but even the barrier of like having to go and get a college degree to learn all of this stuff is kind of being eroded a little bit, simply because you can go to YouTube, you can go to a channel like yours and hear some good history and hear that nuance and stuff like that from really some of the top historians in the game. Yeah, I don't know where I was really going with that, but it's an exciting time to
It is,
be into history.
I know what I'm doing is I'm bringing the really knowledgeable people to a platform, but the audience doesn't necessarily know how to discern about the good history and the bad history.
Yeah.
I mean, I just started a tweet this morning about peer review and academic history and popular history, and that challenge of making sure that something you produce has been through some kind of process of fact correction, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating to me sometimes that my channel is getting limited numbers of views. I know I'm waiting for analytics to kick in, but they're watching, there are 5-minute clips of things about World War II full of just, well, look, there's stuff about Hitler. There's Hitler conspiracy stuff, for example, that is getting hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube. I bring in decent historians, people like Alina Nowobilska, who's a Polish English historian living in Poland, who talks about like the first transport to Auschwitz and things like that, based on proper research. Her grandfather was in the Warsaw Uprising, all those kind of things there, and that gets maybe a few hundred views if I'm lucky. And that's a challenge to trying to kind of get the word out that there are different levels of historical accuracy, and popularity does not always equate to accuracy, and in fact often the opposite is true. So that's an ongoing issue, but I think eventually you stand by what your output is, and I got historians lining up to come on my stuff, and it's such a privilege. I mean, last night I did a show about the Chindits, who are, for the American audience, the British equivalent of Merrill's Marauders, basically. Both let down by Vinegar Joe Stillwell towards in 44, 45. Let's not start me on that one. But Tony, who wrote a book, his father was a Chindit officer. He was very comfortable with me on screen. he was talking about the fact, these guys have dysentery, they have malaria, they're not eating enough, the conditions they have to do. And he eventually at the end of the show talks about how Chindit veterans he spoke in a kind of confessional, almost sitting on the psychiatrist's desk, kind of couch way, about how they had to shoot their friends at the side of the track so they wouldn't be discovered by the Japanese and killed. And you're realizing you're creating these little magical moments, I think magical moments in history where someone is conveying something like that. And he's done his research. He's not making stuff up. He's a credible, proper historian. And there's 150 people watching it live, because at the same time last night there was a Band of Brothers live stream being watched by 15,000 people. Very, very good. Friends of mine hosting it, friends of mine appearing in it. George Luz was in it. George Luz Jr. was in it. But it is also going over ground that has been well trod and well understood. But it's that power of certain aspects of World War II being a huge draw and other parts not being a huge draw, yet why is the audience not more even between those two? That can be frustrating at times.
Yeah, no, I completely get it, but I don't hand out or I don't make recommendations often on channels, but yours is definitely one that I would recommend to people, because you're going to get a doctorate level education in World War II, and you're not going to have to pay the doctorate level prices.
And I'd also hope that not doctorate in the sense of not being accessible. I mean, that's the problem, as you know, as an educator, is so much of the PhD level stuff is inaccessible, unreadable, pretentious, full of its own self-importance, and you couldn't possibly share it with your class. And by the other extreme, as you said earlier, Simeon Ryan is accessible, is understandable, is approachable, and you can start a discussion from it. And so I would like to think we have a couple of laughs on our shows, and we drop the F-bomb every now and then, and we joke about things, and our live shows, when we're out of winter, we can get back to doing stuff live in the battlefields again. That would be very exciting. Doing live shows from the beaches and from the battlefields and things like that. And even I'm torn with this idea of, if I go back to Omaha Beach, I'll get more views than going inland, because Omaha Beach, again, we've established is popular. And so it's like trying to kind of present that, okay, if they want, I'm doing theme weeks now. So Burma week. So first show, James Holland, internationally renowned historian. It was an odd time of day because I was fitting into his busy schedule. Three times more views than the next show, with a lesser known person, Richard Duckett, talking about the special operations executive. But I knew James Holland would be the big one. I knew it, and he knew it. But I think over the course of the 7 shows, they'll balance each other out. The bigger hitter, the heavy hitters will kind of help support the little hitters, and the body of work will work in its own right. And that's what I'm trying to do with this sense that it's not about watching one show. It's about watching one show as a springboard to something else. And you kind of go sideways, up and downways through the kind of spider's web of content. I want to do more about the weapons and equipment. So I've got a show next month about anti-tank weapons. So we've got a Panzerfaust expert, a bazooka expert, and a Piat expert. And we'll just basically talk about what were the effectiveness of these weapons in combat, and not just based on legend, what is the documented fact? What studies were done at the time looking at the effectiveness of Piats and bazookas? Not just, people say, it could knock the wings off of an ant. That's just a statement someone said. What's the actual historical, what's the word I'm looking for, provenance of that? And that's what I'm trying to do these days. And it's very exciting times. It's been an incredible amount of work, incredible hours, as you're doing. The challenge is that the challenge is offset by the fact you're getting through to people, and you're getting these connections, and you're helping people. Nothing pleases me more than getting someone say, "You've made me question the books I've got now," because that's great, because you've opened up critical thinking, and.
You broke my heart with the John Steele episode.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. I'm really sorry about that. I know. And we were so careful, Marty and I, with our language in that, to not really kind of, I got hostile emails from people saying you are shitting on the memory of 82nd Air. I said, I'm not shitting on anybody's memory. I'm investigating a story, and I'm not making definitive claims. But yeah, no, it's I'm sorry about that. Yeah,
I think it's good. I think we need to be challenged. I love what you're doing. And yeah, definitely looking forward to what you got coming up in the future.
And definitely, I'd like to collaborate with you when you get back to Normandy again to go and do some stuff working together. I'm all for the various mediums coming together, and your channel and my channel, other people and podcasts and things, because there are some amazingly dedicated people doing some amazing work to bring history. And History Hack is a podcast. I do some work with them, Alina and Alex, who do that, and they're up to 400 podcasts in a year, and they tackle everything from medieval history, and they did sinkholes in Paris, and about the fact in the 17th century people were just walking down streets and disappearing down sinkholes. And then they'll go into they did like an hour and a half show this morning about the troop carriers on D-Day and all the myths about that. And so there's some incredible stuff happening out there. What I would stress, if I've got a little platform with you, is that if you are someone who is watching these channels and they are talking about the fact they need help financially via Patreon or donations, is do consider helping these people out, because the time it takes and the energy and the money it takes to put these things on is vast.
Yes, it
and
is.
People think nothing about their monthly subs to Netflix or whatever it would be, or this, that, and the other. And it's such a struggle to get people to want to help these independent people that are doing stuff, such as myself, such as you, such as History Hack, all these other things. There is just consider about what you can do to help, because I'm putting all my stuff on YouTube for free, because I think it's important that students in bedrooms can have access to decent history. And that's something that I know we're rambling a lot now, but some of the best books about history, like take John McManus, take Peter Caddick Adams' book Sand and Steel, which I think is going to be the definitive book on D-Day. It's that thick, and it's 30 quid new from a shop in hardback, and there are people out there who don't have, what's that, $40 to spend on a book,
right?
So they will use YouTube, and those people will have access to that. So think about, if you're a viewer of JD's channel or my channel, if not necessarily your own point of view, think about this resource in terms of who else is seeing it. Think about the students who are seeing it. Think about the people who are at the bottom end financially, who have access to something. What you're doing is you're helping them get access to quality history. You're helping create the next generation of historians, because the next generation of historians will not have come from the same world I came from and you came from. They will have come from people who grew up playing Call of Duty and watching YouTube.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that with negative connotations, by the way, because there's nothing wrong with learning your history from video games. I learnt mine, or rather I started my journey reading comics.
Yeah.
And so, they support the creation of historical content, because understanding our past is essential for moving forwards. In America and Britain right now, we're divided. Our countries are split down the middle politically. We're failing to understand our history. We're getting upset about history and the statues and things like that. And the more we look at it, the more we discuss it, the more we keep civilized, we put our points of view across, and we understand where all these things come together, the more chance we have of moving together forwards in one direction, with all the various communities with the different feelings they have about this, accepting that there's a difference of opinion, accepting that we can learn by moving together. And we've got to get over our the fact we had an empire and we treated lots of people around the world very, very badly, and are probably still treating lots of people very badly, women, and we need to move on and say, okay, failings of the past, hope for the future, move on, move forwards. And that is by encouraging people who are younger, who are coming through, analyzing this stuff and being able to sift through some of this stuff for us. Rant over, I'm off my soapbox.
Hey, that's exactly why I'm wanting to come back to Normandy and collaborate with you. That way, I mean, with me, I'm a monkey with the camera. Maybe we can get you on there and actually have some intelligent thought. An
intelligent thought isn't scary, folks. It's be challenged, think about what the things are that you think you believe. Think about, be prepared to be open-minded. Americans don't just, if you've got a case that if you think Montgomery is useless, what's your case? Put forward your data, put forward your theory about why he's useless, so I can engage you. Don't. Well, that happens to me when Montgomery is useless. I go, why? Name the things he did that were bad. Name the other candidate who would have done that job better. And if you can't come up with someone, then shut up. Sort of. And I'm saying that as someone, by the way, I don't particularly like Montgomery as a person. He's one of the most difficult people we had. Not quite on a par with MacArthur, who was even weirder.
Yes.
Anyway, I digress again. I'm enjoying talking to you, JD. It's really nice having someone else ask me the questions, and I'm not in charge of plotting it. I'm just rambling now. I love it.
No, yeah, definitely appreciate you taking the time to kind of hang out with me and talk. And yeah, I definitely appreciate the work that you're doing on World War II TV, because yeah, I've been learning a lot. So I don't know, I can't think of a better place to wrap up than that. But yeah, anybody who's watching, like I said, I don't make a ton of YouTube recommendations, but this one is definitely one to subscribe to, because you're definitely going to learn a lot. But yeah, hey, thank you very much, and you're doing incredible stuff as well. And yeah, no, brilliant. I've enjoyed talking to you. It's been fun, and we'll do it again. Yes,
let's do it again.
Let's get this pandemic over so I can come over and we can hang out a little bit.
Yeah. I'll have a Guinness, please.
All right, thank you.
Okay, cheers then.